Sorry for the delay. About to start. Okay, cool. Ready to get started. Right, everyone. My name's Martin. I'm a teacher at North. Also a professional web developer, full stack developer. I've been doing so for over a decade, and actually also mentoring and teaching for quite a few years now. Before I start, I just want to discuss the teachers at North and students just asking for help. I do believe that some students are a little bit, just a bit shy. They don't, a bit worried in approaching the teachers. So I just want to say that we all started as beginners in web development. None of us were professionals starting. Some of us just started a bit earlier, so we're a little bit further along. But everybody has to start at the beginning. There's no stupid questions. No one is going to judge you if you come and speak to a teacher. There's going to be no judgments made. You're not going to look silly. You can ask us any question, and it's not going to be a dumb question. You know, we're all actually in the process of learning, and even people, experienced developers that have been doing this for over 10 years, they still have to go and ask other people for help. They still have imposter syndrome, which is where you just don't feel like you actually know enough. A field like this, you can never know it all. You actually have to be careful. You know, our lives are only so short. You have to be careful with what you're going to learn. It's just not possible to learn every single thing there is out there. So don't be afraid to come and speak to us. I promise you, we're a friendly bunch. So anytime, just come and ask us, and we'll help you as soon as we're available. Right. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen now, and then we will start looking at some HTML quickly. Okay, you should all be able to see this page, or at least my screen. Okay, so the first thing I want to look at is just sort of some basic understanding when it comes to HTML and when you're dropping elements in. There's sort of some basic principles that... So let's check the questions. Okay, there's sort of some basic principles that, you know, when you're learning all of this information, it's hard to pick out the things that are really basic to understand. And that's why you want your teachers and your mentors and all of that. They can say to you, look, 90% of that is nonsense. What you want to know is this 10%. That's the really important part. So I'm just going to look at the way that we would typically use a div, and then it goes into your document. So just imagine that this white frame here is your main HTML page, like the body of your document, right? So when you go and you create a div, immediately what's going to happen when you create the div, so let's grab a color here. Immediately when you create a div and you pop it in, what's going to happen is that your div has already got CSS attached to it, and it's going to have the block property. So what happens is that when you drop this in, it's automatically going to go and fill up the entire screen like that. Okay, so this is going to be display block, which is the default for when you're actually putting a div into a document. Okay, what then you also get is inline, like an inline block, right? And then what that typically does is that if it's only going to go and be the size of whatever's inside you. So let's just say that there was actually just some text that was written inside you. Let me just resize that quickly. This is Figma, by the way. Let's go 50. So what's going to happen is that this outside container is going to, when it's on inline, it's going to just be the size of this text. And then if you add more padding in that, obviously it's going to go and grow it like this. But so this is when it's going to be an inline or inline block. And when it's in its normal state, which is display block, it's going to take up all the way to the side of the screen. You also get you get inline and you get inline block. The only difference there is that inline block, you can actually specify a height and a width. So when it dropped on the texture, if it's display inline block, what you can do is you can actually tell it, look, I want you to only be that big. Whereas just display inline, it doesn't accept the height and width properties. Okay. Right, so that's how it typically works with div. Like, you just got to sort of know that as starting with your layout tools, as well as the stuff I'm about to show you now. Okay. If you've been working with Photoshop before, or sort of any art programs, including Figma, you will see that usually there's layers like this, right? So I'm just going to go and just add a bunch of stuff. And usually, let's just say these were inline blocks. What's going to happen is each time you're adding it in, they're going to get added like that. Okay, so what I want you to think about here is think of CSS not as the scary thing CSS is. Think of it as an art program like Photoshop where you have got layers like this. Okay, so I'm sure there is some art programs that you've used before where there's layers. I'll actually just open Photoshop and I'll just bring that in as well so you can see what I'm talking about. This is something that I've been teaching people for about a year now, and I've had great success with it so that they can understand or grasp HTML and CSS a lot better. Is that if you think of these containers as layers, you will know that like in Photoshop, what you can have is you can have a sort of a rectangle like this, and I can go and put this other rectangle on top of it. So let me just go and just change the color so that you can see it a bit better. So I can put this on top of it like this, but that's not going to happen in CSS and HTML. It's going to go and stick to the side like this because it's following the relative positioning, okay? And what relative positioning is, and it's by default, is that as soon as there's a container, it's going to make space for the next one. So let's just say we actually had display block. You would actually have it would go across the side. So if you were to go and put another container in here, it's going to drop to the bottom one like that, right? Okay. Now that is called position relative. You can go and change the CSS to get a position absolute, okay? And what it does then is it ignores that flow where it goes to the next line. And what it instead does is it goes and pops it right on top like that, okay? So position relative is when it's going to be like this and it flows naturally in the document. Then position absolute is where it's actually going to go and sit right on top at the top left corner of your container. Then you can actually use your left and right positioning to actually move it sort of to the right and down and all of that, according to whatever its parent is that has got relative positioning set. I know that was a really confusing sentence. That's the one that we always struggle with. This inside container that I've put to absolute, it's going to be bound by this container on the outside, right? But only if this one has actually got position relative set on it. Okay. What would actually happen in your HTML document, let's just get rid of all of that. If I had to make this one position absolute, what it's going to do is it's immediately going to go to the top left corner of the screen like this, and it's going to sit as right at the top left of your corner. Corner of the screen. That's because the body's already got position relative set to it. So even if this was nested inside of this container, it's still going to go up to the top left here. But if you set position relative on this container, it's then going to be, when this one's got absolute, it's then going to be relative to this container over here. Okay. Now I know that might take a bit to sort of wrap your mind around it, but what I want you to do is think of CSS the same way that we sort of use these layers in an art application. So if you've used Photoshop, it's going to just create a new document and then just do some basic stuff. If you've used Photoshop, you've already sort of got like a step up against other people who haven't. Because all of these tools with these sort of these layers and all of these things, when people go and write CSS specifications, where do they get these ideas from? You know, is there some kind of standard it comes from? And there is. The standard that they follow is that they are following art applications to write the CSS standards. Okay, so you will see things like this when you go and you drop something like this, and then let's just say we add a border here. Just make it a red border so it's more visible. So I don't know Photoshop that well. This is the same as HTML, right? There's a background fill, there's a border. You can even go and adjust the corners like that if you want. So you can see this is basically the way that CSS works. And that's actually a really good thing, because that means if you can design something really cool in Photoshop, then you can apply the exact sort of layering system that you've got here to build out your CSS. Okay, so I'll show you an example of that. So I'm just going to go and just going to search for Norif. I just want this Google page here. So I actually want google.com. I just want like a header and a footer. Okay, so here's Google, right? Now I'm just going to go and just take this, and I've captured that as a screenshot. And by the way, on Windows, you can just push Windows key Shift and S, and you can actually take a screenshot. I think in Mac, you can do Command Shift and then the number 4. It's got the same thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go and just paste in that Google page that we've got here. Okay, so we've got this, right? So if I come now and cut it off. Don't know what happened there, sorry. Okay. So at the top here is a header. Then you can see in the middle, we've got a body, and then at the bottom, we've got a footer, right? Now, this is the way that I would immediately approach this, just after all the years of doing HTML and CSS. Immediately in my mind, I've broken this down to exactly the way that I want to lay it out. And that's not some kind of special ability that I have. It's just this way of thinking, and it just sort of comes to your second nature. Is that, say I want to go and build this Google page art. Okay, I take a rectangle, and I've got on the outside, I know immediately we're going to have an outside container, right? So like your body container, I don't like to use a body as the outside. I like to have a container inside of the body. But so you can see that, let's make sure there's not one of you messaging me. No. So this is going to be a container on the outside to contain all of our content. So I just want to actually make this just a little bit transparent so you can see what I'm doing here. Yeah, okay, so that's great. So I've got my main container on the outside. Now I'm going to want to go and put my footer in, sorry, my header. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to draw a header in here, and that's where my header is going to be. Let's just make that just a color so we can see it. So it's going to be red. Then I'm going to want to have my body on the inside. Sorry, not my body, but like my content. And then, sorry, I have to keep changing the color. And then lastly, there is going to be a footer. Okay, so let's go and just change the color for that. And I'm going to go and just disable this Google picture if I can actually get it. Okay, so here is basically that page that we just saw now. On the outside, this container over here, I'll make it like a color that can be seen better. Let's go like a light blue like that. So now, on the outside, I've actually got a main container. Well, usually I call it a wrapper. And then on the inside, I've actually now got my header. I've got my content where that content was. And I've got my footer. Now, this as it is now is already your CSS. This is exactly how your CSS is. So I know immediately when I go into my document and I want to go and actually build this, I know I'm going to have a div container on the outside. Then I'm going to have a header at the top. Then I'm going to have this content div, sorry, it's a main. So I should be calling it main. Main in the middle. And then lastly at the bottom, I got my footer. And it's that simple to actually go build this out now. I just have to have display flex on this container. And then I need to go, I'll get to that question in a second. And then I'll just make this flex direction column. And it's just going to display the stuff down. And then further, you just actually have to add flex grow on this, and it's actually going to grow your content and push this footer so that it's flush with the bottom. Just want to go and answer this question, and feel free to ask questions as we come along. I'm not going to wait till the end. You can, if you've got a question, you raise your hand, speak up, and I'll address it. Someone asked, any disadvantages or advantages in treating them as separate containers instead of two containers inside a main container? I don't believe that is the way that we want to address it semantically. The way that we actually, this container on the outside, it's more like just a wrapper. Your main container is actually going to be where your content is. So this is actually going to be a header tag, like that. I hope this isn't, the color isn't contrasting too much. I apologize if it is. So I should be a little bit more considerate and just get the colors a bit better there. Okay. So this would actually be a header. This one would be your main. What are the shortcuts? This will be your main. And then lastly, the bottom one will actually be your footer. So you wouldn't really have the wrapper being the main. You'd actually want to have it as your header, and then so that a screen reader is going to pick up that this is a header. Then this is going to be the main with your content, and then you're going to have your footer at the bottom. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's actually just go very quickly and actually just build this out. Just trying to see how I can actually. So I'm actually working in a VM. Yeah, I'm working in a Linux VM where this is actually now in my Windows system. So what I'm actually going to do is, I guess I'll just go and load this here, and then we'll actually just design it from here. Just try and keep in mind what I actually did there. So what I do is I'm going to create an index.html file. Okay, let me just zoom in so you can see the code a bit better. Okay. Now before I start, I just want to show you a very cool trick. These are called emits, and what they do is you can put just a very small shortcut key, like a script or like an alias, and what it's going to do is it's actually going to go and populate it with a bunch of code that you had. So you can actually create these things yourself. If you ever find that you want to make something, like it's called boilerplate, if there's something that you're always redoing, you can actually create an emit for it and then just keep reusing that emit to generate your code. So I'll show you now exactly what I mean. We're going to be going over VS Code in a moment, where I'm going to show you sort of all the cool tricks I've learned over the years. So over here, there's an arrow. When you hover over the text, click that. You're always going to want this thing open. There's so many cool things that you don't actually see because it's never actually open. So you want to go and just open this. Now it's showing me if I'm to actually go and put this and push tab, it's actually going to go and completely form our document. You know, like there's something important about being a programmer, web developer, all of those. We aren't expected to know all of the stuff by heart. No one's going to expect that from you. And if your boss does expect that from you, then maybe you should possibly work at a different place. This kind of stuff, you're not supposed to know this off by heart. What you do need to know is what these things are doing. You can always go and Google and find out what do we actually need to add in the document here. But what's actually the most important thing is that you understand what you are doing and you also know how to actually Google for solutions. So that if you're stuck on an island but somehow there's internet, you could still go and build an app completely because you've learned how to basically Google. But if you don't know all the HTML tags, you don't know all the CSS, that's perfectly fine. Even myself, and I'm sure many other developers, maybe they don't want to admit it, but they also have to go and Google things and they can't remember what that one CSS property is. It's perfectly fine. It's as long as you know how to Google the things you want to get and you understand what they were doing. Okay, so back to the emit. I'm going to go and push exclamation mark and I push tab. And immediately over here, what we've got is it's actually generated our code for us. So let me actually move this over. I've got a bug with this. Hold on. Okay, so now you can see the code nicely. So when I said that there was that design, where is my Figma? This over here, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to go and have our div. We're going to have our header, our main, and our footer. And then you're going to see that what I'm trying to show you is that if you can sort of try and think of things as layers, it's that basic to actually build out your page. Okay, so we had, on the outside, we had a div, right? But before I create this div, I want to show you something else. And it's called, I think this is called autocompletion. When you are typing out your HTML tags, and this is only in HTML, when you type out your HTML tag, you will see that once again, we've got more emits. So if I push tab now, it's automatically gone and created my divs like that, okay? Now there's actually some really cool stuff that we can do with this. You can put your element, and then if you put a dot, you can now actually also add a class name. So maybe this would have actually been called something like main wrapper. Now I can actually push tab, and there we go. Now I've actually got my div. Let me make it bigger one more. I've got my div with the class that's been added to it, and that's amazing. Like if you can start typing like this, your workflow is going to increase, and workflow is incredibly important. You need to have a great workflow in creative things that you do, and programming is actually a very creative thing. So yeah, I'm going to be touching on workflow in a moment. Now this is not the only thing you can do with this. It actually gets even more complex than that. What you can do is you can even do a bit of mathematics. So let's just say I had a div. I'm going to add a class name of main wrapper again. And I can actually do times.3. And I'm going to push enter. And can you see it's actually gone and created a whole bunch of different div containers for me based on that math. So this actually gets really, really complex. And if you are able to work this way, I promise you, you're gonna fly through creating HTML. And you're probably wondering, why would you need to do this like this? Over here, it might not seem very useful, but imagine you need to build 20 list items in an unordered list. Maybe that's a good use case for it. So there are reasons to be using that sort of time system. Okay. So what I'm doing is just deleting them, and so now we're gonna have our main wrapper. As you saw on this document, we've got our main wrapper, which is this black one, right? Now I'm going to go and I'm going to add the header, the main, and the footer. So now what I'm going to do is just say header and say this is my header. I'm going to have my main. And then lastly, this is footer. And I'm just going to go and use Live Server to open this. Okay, so yeah, we've already got sort of the basics of what we need. That is our HTML done. We don't even need to start it any further. We have actually gone and we've actually created this as it is. That's it. It's done. Now we're just going to go and we're going to go and add a style sheet so that I can style it out. Once again, there's emits that you can use. So I'm going to go link. And then you can see there's a link here, and it's actually going to link CSS for me. Look, I can do style sheet linking, I can do fave icon linking, all kinds of cool things. So I'm going to push tab, and there you go. Look at that. It's amazing. So I'm going to go and add style sheet here quickly. I'm just going to call it style.css. And by the way, I don't usually open and close this. That's a workflow killer. It's just I want you to be able to see everything on the screen at once. So I'm going to go / and there is style.css, and I'm going to save. And then, oh yeah, I actually need to discuss this quickly. If you have more than one monitor, you should really be making use of it. Coding with more than one monitor is just amazing. Like it's really tough to try and code in one monitor. So what you can be using on one monitor is you can have your code over here, and then on the other monitor you can actually have your HTML document. So you don't have to mess around like I'm messing around here, because once again it's a workflow killer. And to take that further, what you can also start doing is you can split your pages up, down, left, and right. So for example, I want this to be on the screen at the same time. I can split this down. Okay, so it's split down. You can even split it inside of this box. So I'm going to split it right. So yeah, what I could do is I could have my JavaScript here, I could have my HTML over here, and I could have my CSS over here. Sorry, can I zoom in on the HTML file? I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Right, so you can actually go and split your files apart. Hope that's good. Oh, sorry, over here. Okay. Okay, so you can split your files apart like that. And then not just this, here's another important one, is that usually we're using a terminal, right? So we can just Control-Shift-C in the actual, sorry, is it Control-Alt-C? Sorry, Control-Shift-C will actually open up your terminal in VS Code wherever you're working. And that's great to have a separate terminal. Like if you may be using, if your computer's not very strong, you generally want to have a separate terminal. If you're like doing npm start for React, you don't want your terminal to be slowing down VS Code if you are working on, like, for example, laptop where things are slow. But if you do have a high-powered computer, what you can use is the terminal in VS Code. There's a shortcut for it, but what I usually do is just from the bottom here, you can actually just drag it up, okay? And there you go, there's your terminal. And what I also like to do, depending on what I'm working on, is that this terminal can actually be shifted around the screen. So I can actually move this panel to the right. Okay, I like doing this when you're like working in Node, which is a backend. And then generally you've got a lot of feedback coming through your terminal. So over here, for example, this is a great use case for when you need to use Node. I'm just silencing my phone. Sorry, I forgot to do that. Okay, so yeah, you can go and move your terminal around like this, but I don't need a terminal in this case, do I? No, I don't. Okay, so let's go and continue with our CSS. I wanted to split this down. Okay, whenever I'm doing CSS, or whenever you're working with CSS, one of the coolest things that people often don't take advantage of is that CSS gives you visual feedback. A lot of programming, you don't get visual feedback. Whereas in web development, we get visual feedback, and that makes debugging things just so much easier. You know, humans, they use their eyes for everything. So what I like to do when I got classes and things to make sure that things are working, I just go and start throwing backgrounds into things. So yeah, I've got my main wrapper class. I'm just going to go background, red, and save it. And there I go. I can see that already I've got my background being applied there. You know, there might have been a typo here like this, and then I'm writing code here, and nothing's working, and I'm going to like the teachers and I'm like, I just don't understand what's working. Sometimes this kind of debugging, it'll make your life a lot easier and less frustration, and less frustration makes you a happier developer. So what I like to do is just always do this. There are some other tricks, like what I've seen some people do, which is a very popular one, is they put a star, and this selects everything. And what they say is border 1px solid red, and then they save it. Now every single container and every single thing is going to be red on the screen. So you see there, I've taken out that class. Let me just do that. And you see that now every single thing has got red. So that's a nice way, but I don't like messing with this. Actually, sorry, it shouldn't actually be border. I'm so sorry about it. It should be outline, because a border is going to shift your content, as you could see there, because of the box model, which I'm going to have to save for another day. Okay, so let's get rid of that. We don't want that in there. By the way, you're going to see me commenting things. So I guess let's just actually have a quick discussion about that. There's two types of comments, and I'll do it in a JavaScript file instead. Okay, so usually you got a single block comment, which looks like this. This is your single block comment. And then you also get, just going to write nonsense code here. You also get a block level comment. That's where you can select a whole bunch of text, and then you can actually go and add your comments around that. You should be making use of your shortcut keys, and time bearing, I'm hoping to actually address shortcut keys towards the end, but you should definitely be using your shortcut keys for certain things. And I will be discussing it a bit later, but you might be seeing me doing comments, and I just thought I'd let you know. So you get a single line comment like this. This is generally, these comments are usually used to document your actual code, where people generally use this to sort of block out code that they're trying to debug and all of that. But whichever you use, that's up to you. If you are sort of documenting a lot of lines of code, generally this is the better way, because I can just keep typing in this and I don't have to keep adding lines like this. Okay. Yes. Okay, so that was just a quick touch on comments. We will be coming back to that in a moment. Like, let's actually finish building this page out so we can jump to some cooler stuff. Right, so I had that main wrapper in there in the page. Let's go back here so we can actually look. So I've got that main wrapper. So main wrapper. And as I said to you, we're just going to want it as a display flex. Sorry, I had a syntax issue there. Display flex. Okay, I'm going to save it. And remember I mentioned that those emits you can even write yourself. If I go df, I've created my own. I just push tab, display flex, just like that. I've actually got another one, but it's on my laptop, where I've got like display flex, justify content center, align item center. So I just go dfcc, and then there's my code already added like that. Yeah, I'm gonna like keep emphasizing workflow is important. Like it's something that I learned when I went to when I studied music. Like if you don't have a good workflow, you just don't ever realize your true potential. Okay, so there's our main wrapper. Now we're just gonna go and just do our header class. So I'm just gonna call it header wrapper. And just to speed things along, I'm actually gonna go and just main wrapper and then footer wrapper. And then I'm just going to add these classes. Yeah. Okay. So here's another cool trick. In VS Code, you can multi-cursor select things, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold the Alt key and I'm going to click in different places. So here is my cursor now. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to click here with the Alt key. Can you see that now there's two cursors bouncing? And then lastly, now I can do another one. So now what's happening with these sort of multi-line cursors, I can't remember what it's called, multi-level cursors, multi-line cursors. Now your code is duplicated in more than one place. So now I can go and say class is equal to, and just do that. Now I don't know what my classes are yet. And so now I'm going to just add my classes in here. Header wrapper. This isn't the way that I would normally name my classes. It's just for example purposes. Main wrapper. Footer wrapper. Okay. So let's just add some basic code in here. Like remember I said to you, I want visual feedback when I'm actually coding. So I'm making a mess when I type. So Rebecca Purple. And so immediately can you see that there's actually something that's possibly going wrong here. It's maybe I haven't saved my file or something, but there is something going wrong because as I'm saving it, this background should have changed. So let's just go background. Okay, so let's save it. This might just be, oh, whoopsie. Sorry. called it main wrapper. I'm just going to call it outside wrapper. Sorry, that's obviously where my mistake came through. Wonder if somebody pointed that out. No. Okay, so we've got our page like that, and then I'm just going to go flex direction, column. Okay, so that's working. Then on main wrapper, we're going to say flex grow 1. And then the last thing, and I'll show you what's happening now, is that when you're creating your page, just basic HTML, CSS, your HTML and your body, they are not spanning the entire page as of yet. So that's something you're always going to have to go do. You're always going to have to reset this margin that you can see. Can you see how it's not actually stuck to the sides of the page? That's a built-in default that your browser is adding in for you, and we just don't want that. And then you're going to have to set your HTML and your body. Let me finish that up, and then I actually want to just quickly discuss the dev tools. So what I'm going to just do over here, just to sort of cheat, I'm just going to say HTML body. I'm just going to say 100 height is going to be 100 view height. Okay, so now our body and our HTML is now spanning the entire page. And then our outside wrapper, we just want this to be height of 100%. Okay, so let me just take this flex grow out. So this is usually what you're going to happen, and people struggle. Like a long time ago, I promise you, this was one of the most frustrating things, was how do you get this footer to the bottom of your page? And I know that people are struggling with it from when I've marked the work. How do we get this to the bottom? Now, what you can either do is you can go and take this container and have it as a height of 100% minus the height of this and minus the height of this. Then basic math says that it's going to be perfectly the right size to fill the screen. But what I prefer, because usually there is a flex container, is that you just go flex grow 1, problem solved, call it a day, go home early. Okay, so now it's actually spanning the entire page. Don't worry that it's sort of going out like that. That's because of me sort of doing silly things. So I can just go and say margin 0, and there you go. So that's me just turning the margin off on the outside. And then you can see the page is exactly like we needed. If I go and resize it, the footer is right at the bottom, and no matter how tall, it can be the tallest page in the whole world, the footer is always going to be at the bottom of the page. Okay, so just before we continue, let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, I'm gonna run out of time. Okay, so MJ, is it maybe fine if I go past the hour? And I mean, those that need to leave, they can leave, but then, at least who want to watch the video, they can watch if it's an hour, 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Cool.
Yeah, if anyone needs to go, then they can. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, everyone. This is just quite a bit of content that I'd like to cover, just to make sure that you land on the ground running. So I found out that some students aren't making much use of dev tools, and they're making things a lot harder for themselves than it needs to be. You need feedback when you're coding. Otherwise, it's like driving blind. You need to see as you're driving, is there a pole coming up? Do I need to turn? Same thing with coding. We want to know what our stuff is doing. We're the masters. We're the one that's controlling all of this stuff. And part of, being the wizard behind all of it is that you get to know what's happening behind the scenes. So when you get to your dev tools, you can right click anywhere on the page and inspect it. Okay. And this is in all browsers. Some of them aren't so great. Like, I don't think you should be using Safari to do this. Like, only develop in Chrome or Firefox. In Chrome or Firefox, don't be using Safari. It's not there for proper development. But you should still, though, check how your pages look in Safari if you do have a Mac OS machine. Okay, so let's go and just inspect the page. So you right click and you can inspect. The other alternative is, and you should probably always know this, is you can press Control, Shift, and R. Okay, and that's going to open it for you. Unfortunately, I don't know what the Mac alternative is. But after the session, I'm preparing a document where it's sort of a cheat sheet for everything I've discussed, and I'll speak to the other teachers that do have Apple machines and just ask them to give me the shortcuts that work for them. So don't stress about that too much, but you should know the shortcut for whatever operating system you're on. F12 also works, I believe. Yes. Okay, so that's even better. F12. Thanks, Oliver. So F12 is a much easier shortcut, and I guess that's on all computers. Okay, so, and the reason why I'm telling you the shortcut is sometimes you can't right-click and inspect. I'll give you an example here if you want to try to be clever. Is I'm going to pull up, this is Discord, right? Okay, this is meant to be an application. Do Control-Shift-R, and what is that? There is the CSS in your Discord. Because it's actually a web application. I believe it's Electron. But anyway, so that's why sometimes it's good to know the shortcuts, is because you can't always right click to get to that information. Okay, so the two things that are really sort of important in here is that we can go and hover over our elements when you're inspecting it, or you can use this inspect tool over here to look at our different elements, and you can see that it's actually highlighting that particular element as I'm hovering over it. Okay. In Chrome, one of the coolest things, and it's the reason why I'm always using Chrome, like I prefer Firefox, but Chrome is just so much better at this, is that when you're inspecting text, you might see it there. I know it is a little bit small because I'm on a 4K screen, so I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can actually be clever here. So I think there's a trick that I can do. Okay. Sorry, I'm just taking a screenshot there. Don't know why I didn't. Sorry, just bear with me. Don't know why I didn't do it. I wanted to just show you this thing close up. So if you're inspecting on the page, not in the HTML, on the page with Chrome, it actually pops up a box and it tells you what your font size is, what the background color is, and important is that it actually shows you the contrast of whether your page is actually meeting accessibility standards. Firefox has actually got an extension you can install, but unfortunately they don't include it on the baseline Firefox. So if you do prefer Firefox, they do have an extension that shows that. The other reason why also you prefer to use Chrome, and it's just game breaking to me, is that over here, when I'm resizing the page, I can see the dimensions of the page. And to me, that's very important. Maybe not for everybody, but for me, that's very important. And Firefox, unfortunately, just hasn't got that. Okay, so moving on. When you bring your page out wide enough, also your CSS tools, it will actually go and split up quite nicely. Okay, there we go. So it was only going and collapsing like that because I was zoomed in a lot. So I'm zoomed in, it's going to try and be responsive. You know, it's important that all of our stuff is responsive. So now you can actually go and look at... Okay, I've got a question there from Christopher. I'll jump to that in a moment. So now I can actually look at my different elements and then see what CSS is being applied. And I can turn it off. Like maybe I don't want a flex direction column. I can put it back on, put it off. I can actually even go in here and delete that part, and then it's actually showing me all the different things I can do. Maybe it might not even show it. Then what you can do is you just push Control Spacebar, and it's going to show the things that you need. The Control Spacebar thing is actually quite important to know. Even here in VS Code, you probably saw it me earlier. You must always, it usually pops up on its own, but you must always know of this so that you can force it to pop up. And what I'm talking about is like the Intellisense. And what that is that it shows you different things you can add in. Okay, so that's a really important one. Like a lot of the coding, sorry, not a lot of the coding. When it comes to sort of class names and file names, you generally want to use the auto completion to make sure you're not making any typos. You probably won't have classes like that. I think that is an extension of mine. But for example, the file names, you don't want to just type out this on your own. Like, I mean, you can, but you generally learn that you rather just actually want to get this auto completion going. So I'm going to go down to start. I'm going to push it. Now I know I didn't make any spelling errors, and the computer's not going to make a spelling error. So I think it's quite important to try and include that in your workflow. I mean, you can go and type it out, but you're going to have times where your images look, the file names or something like that, and you just shouldn't type that out. You'd rather just go and actually find the file through the Explorer like that. Okay, so let's just jump back to the dev tools here. So we can go and look at all of our HTML. We can make adjustments. Maybe I don't even like this color. I can go and just change the color around like this. It's great for like design. And yeah, that's just like a basic touch on it. Next session, I don't know if I will do it or maybe one of the other teachers. But we also will be looking at the box model, which is just an important part of HTML. You have to know the box model. And at first it might seem complicated, but it's really not actually that bad. So I think that's going to be the basics for building out this page. I I made those changes. All I got to do is refresh the page and it's back to the way that it should be. Because those changes, when I change them here, they don't actually get changed permanently. It's just actually in the browser here. So Christopher asked, how do I organize my CSS categories or laid out to line up with your HTML? Or do you have one or more CSS files? That's a bit of a, like, how long is a string question. Christopher, if you don't mind, I'll address that afterwards because there's a lot. It's quite a loaded question. There's a lot to discuss there in regards to like what is like what do I prefer? What is the most common? And there's a lot for me to go into in that regard. But I'll definitely address that in publicly when we're done with the session. Okay, so what I actually want to now look at, let me just grab my notes here, is I want to have a look at a few extensions, and they're going to make your life a lot simpler. Okay, so you don't have to run these at all. They're just super popular. If you don't know, extensions are it looks like these little building blocks here, and what it does, it's like a plugin for VS Code. It enhances what VS Code does. New cool things. So I'll show you, like, for example, actually wait, let me actually go the list and then I'll show you the examples. Okay, so the first one is bracket pair colorizer, which is this one over here. And what it's going to do, so I need to step down just like one or two more sizes. What it does is it makes your brackets have different colors when they're nested. If you've got like code within code within code, it is really hard to see what you're actually doing. So for example, let me just go and create a function here. Go back bigger. And then inside here, I create an object. Can you see now that my object brackets are now pink, and then the other one is yellow? And then if I have something else inside here, that is now another color. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I didn't actually know that. So someone's mentioned that you can actually turn this on in VS Code. I'm so glad they're adding stuff like that. It's often like that with this type of software, is that the general public, they create something and then the people implement it into the actual app if it's really, really popular. So I believe that this has actually been added in, as well as one of the other ones that I want to discuss, which is the code autocompleter, but I struggle to use it, so I still have to use the extension. So it's come to my attention that this actually might even be built in, but you need to turn it on. But for now, this extension, I can't speak about whether the VS Code one works too well. So I'm just going to continue with this one for now. So this is just going to go and just make your brackets different colors so that it's much easier to see. I don't want to just turn it off and then maybe something crashes or whatever. So, to show the differences. Okay, so that's the first one. The next one is going to be auto rename tag. Okay, so it's this one over here somewhere. Sorry, I'm zooming in a lot for you to be able to easily see. So I guess there it is. So it's this one here. You can see it's got 6.5 million downloads. Very basic one. If I change this part of the div, it means that the footer is going to change. Okay, so if I change this to, let's just say, call it a main, can you see that the top and the bottom have changed? Otherwise, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to select both of them like this, like that, and then like that, and then you'd have to change it. Whereas this is just so much easier. If you just want to change it, you can just go div, and it automatically changes. It does bug out, I'm not going to lie, especially in React when you're using React fragments. It gets so confused. But the amount of time it saves you everywhere else is worth that minor convenience for when you do use fragments in React. Okay. Next one, probably like my favorite extension now. Like I found it a bit hard to use at first because I had to create all the different shortcut keys, but this is amazing. What Bookmarks does, this extension is called Bookmarks, 1.6 million downloads. You can add a bookmark to a file, you can see it there, and then if you assign the shortcut key, you push it, it goes straight back to your bookmark. So let's add a bookmark to this as well, and we go, yeah, now I'm jumping between my bookmarks. Then you can make it that it only jumps through bookmarks in one file. But this to me it's just such a lifesaver. If you learn to incorporate it in your workflow and you've got projects with thousands of files, this can just save so much time when you're trying to dig through everything. Okay. Then there's a material icon theme. This isn't a functionality type of extension. What this is is it's changed all of my files over here on the left to have the official icon for that type of file. Okay, so if I got a CSS file, you can see there's the actual official CSS icon index. You can see it's got that. If I add a .gitignore, like I think that maybe this functionality might even be in here where it always does change the icons. But this one I just love. Like even if you actually do something like script.css, sorry, not script. What is a file here that I can think of? Sorry, it's a folder. So something like tests. Can you see it's actually got like a little laboratory kind of test icon there? Now, to me, I just really love that type of thing. Like it makes it easier for me to spot it, saves my time, and better workflow. Okay. Right, so now I'm just going to go over two of them, which you probably will be actually introduced to in the course. The first one is Prettier. I believe that you are actually really introduced to Prettier, but a lot of people are not. They just don't like it, or they maybe don't know how to use it. So Prettier is very simple to actually get going. You just have to install the extension, format the document once, and then select Prettier. And then ultimately, then after that, what you need to do is you need to go into your settings and set it to save on, format on save, so that when you save the document, it's automatically going to format. So just take a look at this file here. Look at the spacing that's up there, and then the space here. That's not supposed to be there. You know, we don't have the wrong spacings over here. Now I'm going to save my file and watch what's going to happen to this. Okay, something was supposed to happen. There we go. Okay. So I've saved my file, and you can see it's actually gone and cleaned it up. So that's how it looked before, and that's how it looks after, right? So Prettier is used everywhere. It does take a bit of getting used to, because you don't want that thing to be there, or you don't want this thing to be there. But I do encourage you to try and actually get used to using it. Look, it's also good to actually learn how to do this formatting without Prettier. That's also a very good skill to have. But overall, there's a lot of time that's going to be saved, and just making your code more readable if you're using Prettier. So when you do install Prettier, there's one thing that I find that students aren't doing, and they're not putting the settings, they're not adjusting the settings. So I'm going to show you a really cool thing we can do here. To open settings, you can just push Control, comma, and that's automatically going to open your settings. Otherwise, you go to File, Preferences, and Settings. And then you could just say format on save, and there's a tick here. You got a tick. You just turn that on, and first time you save, it's going to ask you which one do you want to select, and you just select Prettier, and that's done. It's set up. You never have to worry about it again. Then afterwards, you can always put it off, but at least then it's actually set up completely. And then just before I go on to the next thing, I just want to show you something else really cool. If you push Control P, you can actually go and very quickly go and explore into your other files. So if I keep pushing Control P, I can jump to my style sheet. Push Control P, I can jump to my index. Okay. But now there's a cooler trick with this. If you push Control P, and you put the right angled bracket, or the end of an HTML tag, you can now run your functions. So you can format document, like a whole bunch of cool functions that you probably wouldn't even have known have existed. So an example of this is you could turn text into uppercase. You can even sort content. You can sort it alphabetically. So if you had a long list of fruit and you wanted to use it in your API, but you wanted it to be alphabetical, this will actually sort your code for you. So it's really cool stuff that might otherwise take a long time for you to do. Okay. There's something that I just want to quickly address. So I often have to mention it in the submissions or in the feedback for students. In web development, the convention for tab spacing is typically 2 spaces. But VS Code actually comes with 4 spaces built in. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say that you have to use 2 spaces. I'm not going to argue that. You can use 4 spaces if you want. However, if you're working in an open source project or in a typical setting today, when you run Prettier, or end up formatting your code, you're going to end up formatting all of their 2-space tabs to 4-space tabs, and they're not going to like that, and they will reject your code, and they're going to say you need to fix it. So that's why I try and get people to start using it. Also, that potential employees, I used to do the hiring for the companies I worked at. I was team lead, and I would do the hiring. If I saw a person with 4 line spacing, they would go to the bottom of the pile, because I feel that they aren't educating themselves enough. you won't be marked down though. So please don't be like scared if your old code doesn't use it, or if you don't even want to use it, you're like, oh, I don't care. But just know that there is the possibility that a future employee will look at your code and be like, I don't know why this person's still using 4-line spacing when it should be 2. And it's super simple to change. Go into settings, control comma, and it's like the 4th setting down, tab size here. So this is default to 4, which is fine in I think like C++ and maybe even C#, but in JavaScript and our atmosphere, we're going to want to have this as 2. But like I said, you're not going to get marked down for that. Okay. Then the other one, which I don't believe is going to be introduced to you yet, but I just want to quickly cover it so you know the difference between the two. As you saw Prettier, for example, if I create that space and I save, it formats it, right? It's called a formatter. Now you also get an extension, which is probably the most used extension. You will have to have this in the workplace. It's called ESLint. And what ESLint does is it lints your code. It will create little squiggles under something. So let's see if I can. Oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to break it. I'm gonna come with a document that I'm gonna release after this, probably this evening. I will go over linting. I don't have. Let me just actually do this, and let's hope that it actually works. And if it doesn't, then I'm just gonna have to move on. Sorry, I dragged it to the side. So I'm gonna show you what the difference is between linting and formatting. No, okay, so I'm going to come back to it. But what it does is it actually goes and it adds like squigglies. So for example, if you didn't have camel case, oh, there we go. Oh, never mind. That's my spelling checker. Never mind. Okay. It would give you squigglies and it would say to you, you shouldn't be doing this. You should actually rather be doing this. And that's going to be a very important one. I guess it's something we should be speaking about in tooling, or maybe I could do another video on that. Then I think this is going to be the very last one. Of the extensions, and that is a very important one, and it's called Code Spell Checker. Okay, what this does is it's going to spell check your code. Okay, you can see 3.2 million basically. For example, when I did this earlier and you saw that blue squigglies come down, can you see it says there malfunction unknown word? So what it does is it checks your words, your spelling. For English spelling. And you might even find that there's maybe even Norwegian spelling, there's Dutch, there's French, there's so many. But you definitely want the English spelling one added as well. Because when you add your code, it is there forever. You can't, it is just always there. There are bots that track every push to GitHub, and they track everything. So if you make a spelling error, that's just always going to be there. You don't want that embarrassment. So if I call it like function like that, you just don't want that. For professionalism reasons, you don't want to be making spelling errors in the workspace. But it's basically there permanently. Because I'll show you another reason why. And I actually come across this in production code. Is that if I actually made the spelling error incorrect there, it's not only just yeah. Now when I call it, it's going to be yeah. Then in another file, it's spelled incorrectly there. And then it just gets spelled incorrectly everywhere, and that becomes such a mess. So this code spell checker is just really important to have, and not just because that if you're Norwegian and maybe your English isn't so great. It's not because of that. Even if you are the greatest English English speaker, you still need to have this to double check your code. Just like Microsoft Word is going to spell check your writing, this is like your Microsoft Word spell checker, and it's very important. You don't want to be pushing code that's got sort of spelling errors like that. You're not going to get marked down or anything of the sort, but that when I try and teach people, I'm not trying to just get you to pass this course. I want you to be a good web developer, and that means also knowing the way that things happen in the workplace. Okay, so we've looked at extensions, we've looked at some emits and the auto completion. Now I just want to be touching on shortcuts quickly, so that I'll show you like the shortcuts that I'm using, and then you can set your own shortcuts. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, there's comments that you should have the shortcut keys for them, so that when I'm coding and I need to do something, I want to comment it out, I just do this. I just click it. I don't have to put that code in there. I just put my shortcut and it's commenting it out. Now, can you see that HTML its comment system is different to when I'm commenting in JavaScript. Okay. HTML doesn't allow you to have that, but I'm still using the exact same key, right? I'm not doing some kind of special key. That's the exact same key that I'm actually using to comment out my code. So having a single line comment, you should have a shortcut key for, as well as your block level comments, you should have a shortcut key for. You should just always so that it's a lot quicker. Then there's just a couple others that I'm not going to show you how to set. Well, I'm going to show you how to set one, but I'm not going to go and set all of them for you because I can't remember what the defaults are. And some of them, for some strange reason, aren't even actually included as a default in VS Code. So the first one we're going to actually do is wrap with, I think it's wrap with abbreviation. And this one is not even actually... Yeah. So this one is not even included as a default. You actually have to set this. There's no shortcut key set. And it's called wrap with abbreviation. And you're going to love this, I promise you. Imagine you've got a whole bunch of stuff here, and now you want to go and put this in an HTML tag. And I promise you, so many developers don't know about this, even 20 years. How do you go and put an easy tag around that? Well, you can't. There's no built-in thing for that. Except if you keybind wrap with abbreviation, which I've set to Control U. I thought I had. Sorry. Let me just make sure that maybe I'm not pushing the right key. Oh, I got the wrong key. Sorry. That is Control T. If this one you would go, you'd have to go and set it yourself. I can now add div and push enter, and it's now gone and it's put that code. It's put those elements around that code for me. That should just be a basic shortcut that's already set, but it's actually not. You actually need to go and find that and then be able to do that. So some other ones that you should always have set is duplicate line down or up. You should actually rather use duplicate line down. And I believe that is like Control Alt down arrow. But what it does, I'll show you now, is if I need to duplicate a line, I just push Control D on mine because I've reset it, and I duplicate a line. So I can just duplicate my code like that. And then the opposite of that, you want a shortcut that is going to automatically just delete a line of code. Okay, you should have that set as well. A very quick shortcut that you're comfortable using. So just quickly add lines, quickly remove lines. And then there's another one which is select whole line. Let me actually just go and check the key binding. So select whole line. I think it's expand selection. I'm gonna have to just double check this. I don't want to waste your time. So sorry. So this one selects a whole line so that you can copy paste it or whatever you need to do with it. And then there's another one, which is this one. You should also have a shortcut set to it, which is add selection to next find. And what that one does is that if I select texture, can you see that these ones are also selected? It knows that it's the same. I can push the shortcut key and select those and then just change them. Okay, so that also important shortcut key. So with those shortcut keys, you work at such an incredibly faster pace. And when you do start trying to set these shortcuts, it's not going to be comfortable. You're not going to like using it. Our brains don't like going away, like sort of out of ordinary things. You know, it prefers to be safe and comfortable. So it's not going to be comfortable when you start doing this, but it's an investment. You're going to be investing in your own time. And in the long run, you're going to be getting major payoffs in time given back to you. Okay, so there's that. I've done tab spacing. Okay, and then there's just something that I just would like to touch on. And then I guess I should just take questions after this. Is the variable naming conventions. Like I know a lot of people do know this, but there's still I'm having to mark people down, and I don't like that I have to do that. When it comes to your variable names, each language has sort of got its own way when it comes to naming variables, and sometimes you even have to mix and match in some places. But with JavaScript, we always want to be using camel case variables like this, okay? And the way that works is that if there's two words, so for example, two words, you combine the words and you capitalize all of the letters except the first one. So let's just take two words except first one, okay? So for us to go and capitalize this, to turn to camel case is we start adding the words together like this, and then we capitalize the first letter, except for the first word. Okay, Your variables must always follow this in JavaScript, every single time. Then for classes, there's an exception here. And for that, we use Pascal case. In your class names, and as well as in React components. React components, you've got to have your capitals. Otherwise, React doesn't consider it as a React component. So in React components and your classes, if you like creating a new instance, usually you would go and use Pascal case like this. I just got to have to mention this for the sake of completion. And if you are on React, and then you get snake case like this. So you will know this from your CSS. You use this for your CSS variables, and then you will use this for your JavaScript. So there is a bit of mixing and matching, and you will most likely be coming across this when you're using other people's APIs, typically PHP APIs. They use this type of variable. So for us, we use this in JavaScript, and in PHP, what they're using is snake case like this. So your backend might be like spitting out these kind of variable names. But we just only want to be using this in our CSS. And then there's lastly one convention, but it's not really followed that much in JavaScript, I find, is that if you've got a global constant, right, then usually what people would do is they'd make it uppercase like this. So uppercase variable. So usually like if this is a global variable throughout your entire project, people would use this, but it becomes quite a mess, because what is now a global variable, and then you end up having a const like this, but then you also but then also in your module you've got like, you got this const now, so it becomes a mess. But it's for the sake of completion, I should mention this. In C++ this is far more common than in here, right? So I think I'm gonna have to let me take some questions now and see how everybody's feeling. I actually had a bit more content planned, but I wasn't able to gauge if I was going to fit this into an hour. I also wanted to discuss arrays, objects, and just some basic functions, because I see some people are still struggling with that, and I feel I would have been able to cover it. So what I can do is I can take questions now, and if any of you want to hang on and hang around, I can then also go and discuss arrays and objects. I don't mind doing that. So yeah, so if anybody's got any questions at the moment, please feel free to ask. Okay, so we've got Sean who's asking, best way to make the links in the header float to the right without the pyramid element using flex, just for content flexed end or line content flexed end. I usually just use space between. So for example, let's just go to here, and it's like one of the easiest things when it comes to a header, like, and I've seen people just try a lot of like strange things to achieve it. Bear with me. I've actually got a tool for this, and I'll actually share it after the session. I've got like a really, really cool flex tool that I've used with some of you already. Sorry, just bear with me. I promise you it's going to be worth it. Okay, so I'll share this with you after the session. So this is like a tool that I created to demonstrate flex. So let's just remove the children. So now imagine number 2 is your menu links, and number 1 is your heading. Simple, simple, simple. If you want to guess it, I'll give you 3 seconds. Okay, so we have flex. Imagine this is in a header. All we do is space between. Done. Justify content, space between. Such an easy solution to this, and it's super responsive. So as we scroll back, it's 100%. You don't need to worry about anything. And then if you wanted them to move down, which typically you do in mobile, then you just change the flex direction to column. And then obviously you take that away. But anyway, so I'll share this with you later. And even if you want, we can go over flex in the next session. So I see we do have some questions. Let me just hop into that. Can't see it. Couldn't you see? Oh, you were good. Okay, cool. Right, so I just lag. Okay, so I hope that did actually see the content, and just on the topic of flex, because it's such a cool thing that I actually read on Stack Overflow. An easy way to remember, if I always struggled, is justify content this way or is justify content this way. So let me actually go. I actually even bought a grid for this thing. Where did I stick it? Yeah, show axis. Okay, so justify content is a long word, right? and a line items is a short word. So just remember that justify content is a longer word, so it goes in the horizontal plane. Justify content is a longer word, so it goes in the horizontal plane. And then it's that simple. You should, like, well, at least for me, very, very easy way to remember. Just remember which is the longer word, and it's justify content. Okay. Right, so I haven't had any other questions. If you would like for me to continue, okay, sorry, do you only use spaces in all file types or only JavaScript? Everything in web development now at the moment. You know, there's certain stacks, but the stacks we're working in is like a JavaScript environment, and every file is going to be two spaces. You can even see here my HTML, it's only 2 spaces. Your CSS as well, it might not have seen like it, yeah, so it's 2 spaces here as well. So it's every single thing. Because what happens is that every time it's 4 spaces, like compare that with this. Now, if you had code indented outwards, right? So there's nested code, nested code. You are doubling the amount of space you're using. And it just becomes that hard when you've actually got code that's sort of all the way indented out here. Like this massive indentation, double that, and then that's 4 spaces. This is going to be down here, you know? So I mean, I won't be surprised if at some point people start actually using 1 space just so that there's more real estate on the screen. And what I'm doing is I'm just pushing tab and shift tab to bring it in and out to change the indentation. Do lines of code have a max character limit we should follow? There is actually a convention of about, I think it's 75 print width, which means, I believe it means that like 75 characters, it must move to the next line. And you will see that actually does happen when you start using things like Prettier. So let's add a bunch of parameters in here. So parameter 1. Okay. So it's not going to, oh wait, I'm going to have to delete this code so that it doesn't break. And just by the way, just so I know it does catch people out, like I actually helped someone the other day. Over here, if I make a syntax error, Prettier will break and it will show an unhappy face. It's kind of cute. And let me see if I can break it. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it actually doesn't show something else, I guess. Can you see that it's, I hope you can see this is in the bottom of the screen here. This has got a caution sign. That means Prettier is broken. So what is gonna happen is that it doesn't understand your code anymore, so it doesn't know how to format it. So it just won't touch it. It's not gonna try to format it. Otherwise, it could end up ruining a whole bunch of stuff. So while it's broken with this sign here, it's not going to format anymore. Prettier's not broken. It's just trying to behave itself. So get rid of the syntax errors that we've got here. Should have just actually undone that. And then save it. Now the Prettier is happier again. It's now gone and it's formatted it perfectly for us. Okay. Oh yes. So here you got the parameter here, and you'll see that if I add a whole bunch of more parameters and I save, it's because I'm zoomed in. So I'm actually just going to zoom out for a moment so that I can try and just force this to do its thing. Okay, so you can see that after I get to a certain limit, Prettier is going to go and stick to that print width that's been set. I believe it's set to 75 as the default, so it goes up to 75 characters and then it breaks to the next line. But you should not have your code stretching out far like this. Your code should be able to be read staring down. You should not have to read across. You know, you need to look after yourself as a developer. You know, it might seem like we're just sitting on our backsides just trying to just coding along, but it's not the case. You can really, really hurt yourself just sitting for a really long period of time. You know, and flying for a really long time, people have passed away from that. So you don't want to be staring with your eyes going across. You will eventually start like injuring yourself. So you want your code to flow down like this. And there's advantages for that. Because if I've got the code like that, then I can stack them very nicely together at that point. Yeah, so that's quite important. Right, so you use only 2 spaces. So that's answered all the questions up to here. I'm going to leave it up to you all. If you want me to continue and discuss arrays or basically data types in JavaScript, I do believe it's beneficial, but I know it's a long time that I've had to force you to sitting here with me. So if you'd like, I will continue. Otherwise, I can save it for another session. Okay, so then I guess no one's really said anything. So I guess we'll just wrap it up here. I guess. Is everyone still with me, or have I disconnected?
No, you're still there.
Okay, great. Right, everyone. Thanks a lot. I hope I didn't speak your ears off, and I hope it was helpful for you. We've got a lot more really cool content like this coming up in the future, and hopefully this will make things a little bit more easier for you. Okay.
Right. Thanks a lot, Martin. That was great.
Thanks all.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cheers. See you around.